Welcome to the 6th episode in the series on Cybis Porcelain, made in Trenton, New Jersey. The collections introduced by Cybis from the 1950s through the 1980s were some of the most stunning porcelain sculptures ever created. These works established the Cybis studio as the premier porcelain art studio in the United States during the 20th century. During the studio's early days, design and creation practices were put in place which are evident on the first Cybis items marked MB Cybis. These practices were carried over to the Cordey China Company and ultimately influenced many of the decisions made in product development and the marketing of sculptures created by the Cybis studio. Cordey had operated as a production facility which offered a wide variety of decorative items made in fine china. Some of these items were offered for sale in pairs or sets, many of which are still found today. The Cordey Company produced candlesticks, vases, dresser trays with trinket boxes, servingware, and figurines that were often sold separately but were clearly meant to be sold together as companion pieces. While the line of products changed with the transition to the Cybis studio, the practice of offering items in pairs and sets continued as Cybis evolved over the years. Neither Cordey or Cybis ever specifically defined products as sets or pairs, but price lists show items with pricing as pairs. Single candlesticks, vases, and figurines were sold with 2-for-1 pricing. These items, while the same mold, were basically two of the same items sold together for the purpose of having a pair. Used on dining tables and displayed on mantels and dressers, these items created the balance often desired when decorative items were used. More elaborate designs can be found specifically as candle holders where a basic mold was used but each piece had unique decorations, creating a left and a right piece. These items were sold as pairs but are more correctly described as sets. Not all pairs are sets, but some sets are pairs. No printed promotional material found so far lists items in this manner, but when classifying these pieces, it helps to understand this logic. Much of what was produced has been lost, but pieces often turn up for sale individually today that were actually part of a set. These items often stand alone just fine, but when displayed with the intended companion pieces, they tell the whole story. The earliest item sold by the Cybis studio listed as pairs on price lists includes the Angels in Adoration. This pair was simply two of the same angel sold together. The Kneeling Angels, as listed in the 1978 and 1979 catalog, were shown on price lists without the notation of the letters PR indicating a pair and pair pricing. Yet on the price list they're shown as Kneeling Angels, as in more than one. A set of cherub heads were listed as a pair, but are two different molded heads with wings which are intended as a left and a right piece, technically making them a set. These were one of the earliest sets offered. An anomaly is the Guardian Angel. Listed in the later catalogs as an individual item, it was listed on early price lists as Guardian Angels with the PR designation and pair pricing. It's likely these were sold as pairs in the beginning and later sold individually, which would account for the discrepancy. But it may also be possible on any of these items that they were initially sold as individual pieces and later paired together with the same item, creating a 2-for-1 scenario. Undeniably, the first actual set Cybis produced with the intention of it being recognized as a set is the Nativity, which was introduced in the early 1950s. The set was an Atlantic mold design of individual items consisting of people, animals, and trees. The studio very cleverly grouped the items together and attached them to bases. The baby Jesus, Mary, and Joseph became the Holy Family. The individual wise men were mounted on a single base entitled 3 Wise Men. 3 other pieces were similarly created, as well as a 4th piece, which is a large fir tree with an angel attached to the top. Only the camels were separate and not attached to an additional base. Ironically, for the nativity set, the camels were sold as a pair. The irony is we now have a pair within the set. This was certainly an unintentional issue, but interesting to say the least. The camel pair, along with the 6 other composites, created the full 8-piece set. Marketed as nativity murals, each piece was priced and sold individually. This gave a collector the flexibility to purchase the Holy Family and add pieces later as desired. Most pieces, starting around $30 in the 1950s, had a price tag that was expensive for its time. So it is possible many people added to their sets each year as they could afford to do so. The nativity murals, like most other items during the 1950s, underwent a design change. The Holy Family mural was given more detail by making the baby Jesus a separate piece, yet still attached to the manger, and by adding a dove just to the baby's right above his shoulder. Older models of the 7 composite sculptures attached to bases are found with convex base designs that contain a bas-relief. This design was changed to a concave design with a plane or smooth surface. The earliest items with convex bases are found marked with the Cybis stamp, usually in pink, and the design number written in pencil on the underside of the base. Later pieces are found with the hand-signed Cybis logo either with or without the design numbers. The catalogs list the nativity murals as having been produced in both white and color. To date, examples have surfaced of copies in white bisque, glazed color, which the studio referred to as stained glass, and sepia bisque, which is also another Cybis term used for items with brown shading. The sepia tonations are mostly brown, but are often found with colors used for accent. There is no reason to assume sets were not also produced in the old coin gold process, which is a Cybis technique not often seen. By the late 1950s, the nativity murals were all retired except for the Holy Family, which continued in the line through 1965. The discontinuance of the nativity murals offers an insight into the kneeling angels being sold as a pair. Cybis later pictured the two in the 1964 catalog along with the Holy Family. While the rest of the nativity pieces had been retired, availability of the Holy Family continued through the first half of the 1960s. As an option for companion pieces, Cybis marketed the kneeling angels as a pair that complemented the Holy Family piece quite nicely. The studio released sets and pairs of candlesticks, vases, and plaques early on, but retired those items as the product line grew. These items are often confused on first glance with Cordey, as they shared similar design. The Cybis items will always be marked Cybis. The cherub head plaque set remained in the line into the early 1960s and can be found with earlier versions adorned with roses, while later editions have no additional decoration. Many of the Holland mold items the studio purchased for production in the Cybis religious line were companions. One unique trio was a group of toddlers dressed in angel costumes. These adorable tykes were clearly meant to be small children dressed as angels, implying they were cherubs. On close examination, though, it's easily seen that they are not angels, but rather children dressed in angel attire, complete with wings. A set of nuns, one praying and the other singing, were additional Holland mold items that found their way into the Cybis line. These whimsical characters are far less characteristic of the other products the studio offered. With the Cybis logo stamp on the bottom reading Cybis Fine China, these are easily dated to the early 1950s. Another set of candlesticks depicting a left and right angel with stars above their heads has been found with minor variations. Measuring 8 3/4 inches tall, these candlesticks were larger than most of the molded pieces of similar quality. The absence of the blue painted base on the variation shown makes it feel just a bit top-heavy. Several of the smaller figurines from Holland Mold had a boy and girl component. One such set, as shown in this hobbyist copy, consists of a boy and girl component. 3 known examples have been found of the girl by the Cybis studio so far, but to date, no example of the boy has surfaced. It's likely he was made, but so far, none have been noted as available on the secondary market over the last 20 years. This particular angel mold sold well for Holland Mold Company and was quite popular. It was also purchased and produced by crosstown rivals Beam Porcelain and Lenox China. Since Holland Mold and Atlantic Mold sold their products without copyright protections, any firm could buy them and produce products from them. There are more than a few examples in the Cybis line where rivals produced similar items from a basic mold obtained from the same vendor. A similar example of a missing boy is the small singing angel. Again, Holland Mold hobbyist copies are found frequently, as shown here, of a boy component, but we have not yet seen this as produced by Cybis. As the studio worked toward expanding its line through unique artistic designs created by in-house and freelance artists, these molds were retired and seldom spoken of again. The practice of offering items with companion pieces was widely seen in the religious items, most often with Jesus and Mary. Most of the busts the studio produced of Jesus offered a companion piece depicting Mary. These were always listed and sold as individual items, even though marketing material usually showed them together, implying they were a set. With the introduction of the Skylarks in 1958, Cybis offered its first set of birds. The practice of offering a male and female version of a particular sculpture had been a consistent practice since the beginning of Cordey. Often when a female figurine was introduced, there was a male companion piece available, making a pair, even though they were sold separately. In the case of the Skylark birds, the two were not sold separately. They were priced as a set, even though they were listed as a pair. This was the case as well for the solitary sandpipers, the blue-gray gnatcatchers, the blue-headed Vero with lilac, and kinglets on pyracantha. Oddly enough, it was not the case for 2 sets of birds from the early 1960s. The Bridled Titmouse and Carolina parakeet were each offered for the male and female sculpture, but were priced and sold separately. The only apparent reason attributable to this fact is that the 2 sets were not introduced as limited editions. There is no way to determine how many copies may exist of either set, but the number must be relatively small, as these 2 sets are not often available. The only sets released by Cybis that contain the actual word set in the official title is the Cybis Presidential Chess Set and the subsequently released Commemorative Chess Set. The Presidential Set was comprised of 32 individual pieces, each measuring 7 inches tall. Initially, an edition restricted to 1, with a single artist's proof having been donated to the Smithsonian Institution, the studio later released another version, titled the Commemorative Chess Set, with an edition limit of just 10. In the 1990s, an additional option was offered to buy chess pieces a la carte as sort of a build-your-own-set scenario. This marketing attempt was not successful, and no pictures of actual pieces produced are available to date. Another way to think about some of the groupings a studio released is by collection. The collection titles were a way to group similar content together. But by the 1970s, we saw what could be termed as micro-collections within the Birds and Flowers and Children to Cherish groups. While never promoted as a set, the Cybis flower baskets were released in 4 variations for the 1976 bicentennial. Each basket showcased flowers from the 13 original states. Later, in 1978, another micro-collection would be offered for the Children to Cherish. Marketing materials specifically published 3 new girls, Allegra, Edith, and Alice, as the Children's Hour group. Each sculpture was a beautiful piece alone, but after seeing the 3 displayed together, how could anyone resist the set? There were 10 pairs of children's busts introduced in the Children to Cherish collection, as well as several sets that were released from the early 1960s to the late 1980s. The busts will be covered in a future video, but for the other Children to Cherish sets, there are 4 worth noting here. Hansel and Gretel, the brother-sister duo, have expressive faces that convince any collector that one could not be purchased without the other. Then, of course, no matter how charming of a little girl this may look like as she stands there holding her bear, once you've seen the companion piece, you realize there is no other way to view Goldilocks than with all 3 bears. And the forlorn look on this girl's face as she stands there gazing into the distance, holding her staff, we all know she must be Little Bo Peep. It would make sense every collector should space the companion Mandy the Lamb at some distance away just to add to the drama of Bo Peep having lost her sheep. Yet another bicentennial introduction is Yankee Doodle Dandy, a colonial boy who fashioned a sword and make-believe horse from items that he had easily available. Likewise, his sister, as the marketing material stated, was named Elizabeth Ann, making a doll out of whatever she can. One other consideration to note about sets is they should never be confused with variations. Cybis did release numerous items over the years which were redesigned pieces, simply reintroduced in a new color or slightly different style. These are never considered pairs and weren't meant to be sets. Another example from the Children to Cherish collection is Rapunzel. Introduced in pink in 1972 as the first limited edition offering for the children's collection, 1,000 pieces were declared. She sold out in 2 years and was so successful, a redesigned Rapunzel was offered in 1974 in apricot in another edition of 1,000. This piece was also a fast seller, and finally, a third variation in lilac was introduced in 1978 for an additional 1,000 pieces. Never before had Cybis seen such a response to any limited edition. Rapunzel was in the sweet spot as a limited edition and with an affordable price. While many collectors wanted copies of all 3 colors, and they do display well together, they are excellent examples of variations, but are not sets. The final set Cybis promoted was the Carousel 2 collection in the late 1980s. The 5 open edition carousel pieces fit in a large 12 by 15 inch stationary display. This set was like most sets previously introduced in that all pieces were priced and sold individually. Many other sculptures from collections such as Portraits in Porcelain and Fantasia and Land of Chimerick had companion pieces that could be rightfully discussed here, but this is a good overview of the many pieces Cybis marketed as pairs and sets. They certainly reflect the quality and the beauty Cybis produced for some 30 years, making it the finest porcelain studio to ever exist in the United States. Thank you for sharing your time with me to learn more about Cybis. If you haven't found it on the internet already, please visit the Cybis Archive at cybisarchive.com, where you can find far more information on individual pieces, the studio, and the people who made Cybis America's premier porcelain arts manufacturer. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and then subscribe so you can receive notifications when future videos are released. I invite you to watch all of the videos in this series, as I'm sure you will enjoy them as well. Thanks again for joining me, and I look forward to sharing more with you in the next episode.